What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So as you all know, today is indeed Wednesday, which means a new summit is now live here in Motorfest. With that, it's also going to be a new month in the game as well, so we're going to have new summits, and we're also going to have the new summit car here at the end, which is the Porsche 919. I gotta admit, this thing's looking pretty dang dope, man. Unfortunately, though, it is at the end of the month. So if you're probably going to be like many people, you're most likely not going to do any of the other summits and most likely wait for that Porsche there. The Audi one here, though, is going to give us a tire, which looks, interesting, I guess. After that, though, guys, the 2-year anniversary of Motorfest. Isn't that crazy, by the way? Next Wednesday is basically going to be the 2-year anniversary of this game. I gotta admit, that's kind of wild, man. Wow, that was lagging pretty hard there. But we're going to have the Crew Year 2 Underglow. We're then going to have the Party Smoke. I gotta admit, I was kind of hoping for something cooler. Maybe it's the Platinum Reward, only because it's the 2-year anniversary, right? Like, that's kind of a big deal in the game, but we're getting the Underglow there. Maybe they could have had the Porsche as that or something for like a 2-year. I don't know, man. But either way, though, for the first summit, here is the one a lot of people are going to do, which is Porsche Ahead, which is going to be the new car you can buy in the shop for $1.3 million, at least the bundle. And with that, you're going to get the Paint Ahead Nitro, which looks interesting, I can say the least on that one. Besides that, guys, the entire summit here is going to literally be Hypercar only, and it's going to be literally the Carrera GT. That's the only car you're going to be running. And all the skills, all the events here, the top 3 are going to be vehicle only. The other ones you can use parts sets and stuff like that. And then the other ones as well for the skills. For these skills, though, the first one here is going to be a speed trap. To be honest, guys, the easiest way I found to do this one is when you spawn in, basically go to the other side of the road, follow that all the way down, turn around, and take the highway back to it. I got around 294. I could easily get like 295 or something like that. I would recommend running a chemist set with pure and frenetic, and that is pretty much all you're going to have to do. Don't worry about jumping in, none of that stuff unless you want to. But I got 146,000 points. Besides that, on the escape, though, honestly, I did pretty bad on this one. I'm not going to lie. My route was kind of wonky. I wasn't the fastest I could be, and I still got 157,000 yards. So I would recommend not really overthinking this one and trying to go crazy on it, because 6,800 yards got me 157,000, which I would say is probably going to be fairly easy to achieve considering the route I took was honestly not that great. For the other one, though, we're then going to have a slalom for this. Once again, very, very simple. All you guys have to do is have at least 3 of your parts, aka 50% boost on score breaker. Every single part besides that, though, have skilled. That is going to give you the 70% on top of the other one, which is obviously the 50% boost. That way you will get yourself 157,000 points. And it's honestly fairly brainless once you do end up getting one of those sets. It's honestly going to be that easy. Besides that, though, for all 3 of the loaned events here, I gotta admit, guys, the overall summit here is kind of straightforward with the events. You are obviously going to probably notice some of the events and most likely recognize them, as we have done them a good amount of times before this, so you're probably going to know them. But I can say, though, the people who are doing the loaned event, I'm interested to know your thoughts on this car. To be honest, it seems okay, I think. I'm not really going to use it that much and test it out, which I would probably say many players won't. But if you want to, though, the other 3 events, though, you can put your own pro settings on it. And I did end up noticing the Carrera GT tends to be kind of unstable for some odd reason. So if you're not running pro settings, do be prepared to probably battle this car just slightly. Besides all of that, though, guys, do let me know if you have any questions at all in the comments below. To be honest, I would say the Ahead Edition is pretty cool, but I really don't think a lot of players are going to like this car, simply down to the fact that you can't change anything on it, not even the livery that's going to be on the vehicle.